With the advancement of artificial intelligence and the expansion of computer science and engineering departments, many universities around the world have taken action and introduced ethical practices into their curricula. At Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, students and faculty have formed Responsible CS, a program aimed to integrate ethics and social impact topics within Brown's computer science department. Professor Michael Littman has taught probability theory, machine learning, robotics, and artificial intelligence, and his research in machine learning examines algorithms for decision-making under uncertainty. He has earned multiple awards for teaching and research, including 3 Best Paper Awards on meta-learning for computer crossword solving, complexity analysis of planning under uncertainty, and algorithms for efficient reinforcement learning. Professor Littman is an ACM Fellow and has served as the chair of the ICML and on the boards of both the Journal of Machine Learning Research and the Journal of Artificial Intelligence Research.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Professor Littman. First off, I just want to get a little bit of your background in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then specifically how we can incorporate or better incorporate ethical practices into higher education.
So sure. So my own background is that, I've been interested in this kind of topic since the 80s, I'd say. I studied AI and computer science more generally as an undergrad, but then I also went on and got a master's degree and worked in a research lab for a number of years, and then got my PhD and worked as a professor at a couple different places. And now I'm at Brown. I got some kind of fancy title recently, which I could quote to you if I have to look it up because it's still pretty fresh and I don't have it memorized yet. But I got I'm a full professor and named chair.
Oh, wow. Okay. Awesome. And you taught machine learning back in, it was 2017, right? And then since then, CS22 and a few other courses. Is that correct?
Yeah. So since I've been at Brown, I've taught my reinforcement learning class and the general machine learning class. I only got to do that once. I taught the AI class, I think twice early on. And as you said, CS22 is a new thing for me. Mm-hmm. And I had taught an intro course for non-majors, non-concentrators for a couple years that I was really excited about and would like to keep doing, but the department has grown a lot and there's just a lot of needs for teaching within the department. And so I got shifted away from that.
Oh, wow. So you've been like all over the place within the department. That's awesome. And I noticed specifically one of your specialties and focuses is reinforcement learning. Is that correct? And computer networking, that was another topic.
Yeah, not so much computer networking. There are people who do that for real. I dabbled a long time ago. I do work a little bit in neural networks, which has networks in the name, but it's really not a networking topic. It's really an AI machine learning topic.
Right. More of like a deep learning application.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So no, you have tons of knowledge, tons of background. So I thought it would be perfect to ask you, and especially with the trajectory and everything that's happening in AI in the tech industry and higher education, even high schools, how do you think in general artificial intelligence and these, really big efforts should be taught more ethically? Because I know at Brown they're doing, they have the Responsible CS program, which I think is really great. I took CS for Social Good last semester. So we really delved into those and every week had great discussions on addictive technologies, how we should better combat this in the industry. But I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So historically, ethics and computer science has had, from an educational standpoint, has had kind of inconsistent relationship. Places where computer science is under engineering often have ethics programs because for accreditation, I'm not saying that quite right, for being accredited as a computer science department within an engineering school, the engineering school has to make sure that all the students take ethics classes. And so I think those schools, those departments have a bit of a history in integrating ethics into what they do. I've never been in a CS department that is in an engineering school, so that's all secondhand for me. I've always been in computer science departments that were under arts and sciences, and there it's to be honest, I've never been in a department where that was really a central class that people were expected to take. Brown in particular has such a kind of open, flexible kind of concept of what it, how students create their own curricula, that the idea of requiring a class like that would be a hard sell. It would be difficult to get the faculty on board. It would be difficult to get the students on board. But Brown is also, I think, a very broad-minded and ethical place. And so there has been a push to make these sorts of things available, and especially to put some kind of ethics units or to integrate ethics in various ways into many of the classes. And this has been growing over the last couple of years. I think a bunch of CS professors have been involved in making that push, and I think a lot the department chair who made sure that it really did happen, and it happened well, and that the department had support from the outside to actually do it well. So it's still relatively new in computer science, and so even before we get to AI and machine learning, it's something that I think is more generally being understood as important. I think it was somewhat easy to ignore for a long time because a lot of what CS did was putting out things that were, I don't want to say narrow in scope, but indirectly influencing lots of people. There's usually many levels between the software and people, and that gap has been shrinking dramatically, especially over the last decade. And what we're starting to see now, of course, is that either explicitly unethical practices or just an absence of thinking about ethics has actually created measurable harms in the world. And I think that the repercussions of that are starting to reflect back into the field, and computer scientists, I think to their credit, are recognizing that this is something that we're not very good at and that we need to get better at and that we need to incorporate into our practice.
Right, exactly. No, I totally agree, because I could see even with, like, we studied certain Amazon algorithms, one that they use to evaluate resumes. You can see, like, oh, as a student, I want to work here, I want to work at this big tech company, but that tech company, you have to look at it as a whole, also ethically, see what they're doing to, to deal with ethics and all of this. So I think it's really important, especially it's getting scarier with these whole, deep learning neural networks, as you were explaining before. And I know, like, for Tesla, for example, the amount of the image recognition is crazy. It's so advanced now, and everything that they are implementing. So yeah, definitely. I know even me taking one CS course in that regard, I know, like, certain other courses like modern web applications, I was a TA for it, and they had, like, the whole ETAs, ethics TAs.
Yes.
That was great, and I love the whole program and everything, but I think taking CS for social good also made me recognize, like, wow, every week we had a discussion on a certain topic in ethics, and it made me really, really realize, like, now when I do a program, I'm thinking, okay, what kind of repercussions will this have on a specific group of people, demographics, that sort of thing. Do you think Brown as a whole has been doing a good job evaluating ethics, as well as teaching, I know, certain new courses and, like, deep learning, and offering new courses?
I do. It's hard to measure at this point, and I think it's still quite early, and I think we're still seeing little bumps along the way. One thing that I would comment on, for example, is we had a couple master students a year or two ago. They wanted to replicate a published result that had been actually the results of which had been withheld from the community because the designers thought that there were ethical issues.
Yeah.
And our students said, oh, but we could do it. And they just did it and they released it. And I think that the fact that they didn't really engage in a substantive way with the ethics of that is a bad sign. It is an indication that we're not all the way mature on this topic yet.
Right. I agree.
The students wanted us, and some of the faculty involved wanted the department to make a fuss, like, hey, these students did this amazing engineering feat. And I think to the department's credit, we did not end up making a fuss. We did not end up trying to get PR attention for this, because we had legitimate concerns that we were going to come across as not really taking these things seriously. Now, a lot of people in the field felt like the fact that these results had been withheld was a ridiculous publicity stunt, but that I don't think that doesn't make it so that we shouldn't engage meaningfully with the question. We should do an analysis and say, we believe that the positives outweigh the negatives, as opposed to just saying they're being silly, we're going to release whatever we want. That to me is not a sign of a kind of mature perspective.
Exactly, because then where do you draw the line? Where do you, should it be like the government's responsibility to implement laws? Should it be the tech company's responsibility? I think we studied that example too. That was with the article generator, where you put in a string. Yeah, that was really creepy. And we did, we talked about that in deep learning. That was really interesting. Do you think along those lines, what do you think, in your opinion, off the top of your head, is the most dangerous application of artificial intelligence in the tech industry?
So, there's some things. Reading a book right now written by a former supervisor of mine called The Ethical Algorithm. And it's very much about trying to understand machine learning in terms of the ethical implications of the work and what is known in terms of remedies, right? What things that we can do to be better, right? And in some cases, there are kind of algorithmic solutions to some of these ethical questions, but at the top level, it's always, no, people have to engage with the question and people have to use their judgment. And so to me, I don't know, the most dangerous, I think it all has real impact, right? So, so the most dangerous obviously would be robots that have live weapons on them, right? Because that's literally, like, you can actually kill someone.
Right, exactly.
And so clearly that's something that is real and needs to be considered really carefully. But there's also much subtler things that I think are very important too. So there was a huge Twitter debate recently that I kind of was monitoring pretty closely. I don't know if you followed this at all, but on the I forget the name of the system, but basically it was doing resolution enhancement of faces.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so you take a picture that's low resolution or a high resolution picture, and you make it resolution, and then you feed it to the network, and then it fills in a detailed face.
Okay.
And so this was a research paper out of Duke, and they had lots of interesting examples. And then in addition to publishing the paper, they also released a demo. And some people played around with the demo, and what they found was, the first thing that I heard tested was, if you put Barack Obama's face in, it basically turns him into a white guy.
Okay.
And in fact, it seems pretty systematic that this system will take people of color in and produce people, I don't know, not of color out. And okay, well, that's a thing, and I think you need to think about that, and you need to think about the implications of a system that does that. But what was particularly like a teachable moment in all this is one of the leaders in the field who recently won the Turing Award for his contributions to helping to create the whole field of deep learning said, "Oh, that's just an issue with the data. Researchers don't have to worry about it." And that turned into a very public and very emotional debate about the how we communicate with each other and how we evaluate our systems, and when there's bias in a system, where do we put responsibility. And it turns out, and I've dived into this in more detail since then, that in fact this is a really well studied question, and the idea that it's just the data is long ago been discredited as an explanation for the various kinds of biases that we actually see in these systems when they're applied to real people. And the fact that, a leader in the field not only wasn't intimately aware of the fact that this is a well-solved problem, a well-understood issue, that it's a complicated socio-technical system. It's not just, give it better data and it'll do a better job. The fact that he didn't recognize that and then specifically argued strenuously against it, again, is an indication that the field has not really matured yet. That this is a point that this is a place that we need to get to that we're not yet.
I guess it's hard to evaluate, but what percentage of the bias that can come from a model is from its data set that it's trained on versus the actual model itself?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think more so than worrying about what to blame, I think is the question of, first of all, creating a pipeline of engineering, right? Where we create these pieces of software where you check to see if it's doing something systematically harmful to some group, right? The fact that the researchers who did this work didn't check that was an oversight, and it's an oversight that we should be striving to not make. To their credit, I think they recognized as soon as this issue came up, they recognized it, and they did, it's kind of the appropriate sorts of caveats in their paper to say, okay, this is biased in various ways, and this could cause harm in various ways, and they added that to what they had written. But nevertheless, it is very difficult, I think, to actually put a number on how much of it is due to the data. And so this is the thing that I've actually been kind of engaged with a lot in the last few weeks. I don't have empirical support for this. I believe that, in fact, in the essence of the algorithm itself and the parameters that were picked and everything about the way that the algorithm is formed, it was biased. It was going to produce results that were going to be better for the group that created the system than to groups that were not represented in that group of creators. And I think that's inevitable. I think that is just a function of the way that we build these systems today, is that there's a ton of knobs. There's a ton of choices that get made. And the choices that are being made, even the ones that seem very neutral, are being made specifically because the designers of the system look at the output and they're either content with it, in which case they stop, or they're not content with it, in which case they tweak. And they keep tweaking until they're happy. Their happiness ends up being baked into the system in a way that's very, very subtle. Right? It's very hard to point to a line of code and say that code, that part right there, is what makes it so that Black women are not as well understood in speech recognition.
Right.
Because there isn't anything like that. It's all the decisions in an aggregate are actually being evaluated each time the designers make any kind of tweak to their system. They're kind of molding it in a particular direction, and if they're ignoring certain kinds of outcomes of the way their system is built, they're gonna be weird. They're gonna be untested, and they're going to be flawed.